Okay, so greetings. Hello to everyone listening. My name is Piotr Sobolewski. I'm the CEO of the Knights of Unity company that ported Scythe into the digital realm. From our company, we also have Jack. Jack, you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Jack, Jacek Iwanicki. I'm a game dev for Scythe Digital.
And I am Jamie Stegmeyer. I run Stonemeyer Games, and I am the designer of Scythe, the tabletop version of the game.
And I am Jan Korno. I'm the Chief Technical Officer at Asmodee Digital, and I've been working on porting board games to video games for the past 18 years.
Sweet. So the four of us are going to be talking about the history of Scythe, how it all started, how we ported the game to digital realm, and what's behind all of this. I hope that it's interesting for all of you, and that you will have some kind of an insight of what's going on behind the scenes, behind the game development with regards to a project like that. Let's maybe start with some simple round of questions to introduce ourselves better. So maybe first question to Jamie. Jamie, could you elaborate a bit on what is Stonemeyer Games?
Yeah, Stonemeyer Games is a small tabletop game publishing based in St. Louis, Missouri. We've been around since 2012, and we don't release many games, so we have around 1 or 2 new games a year. We have a total of 10 games right now, 5 of which were designed by me, 5 of which were designed by other designers. And Scythe, the game that we're talking about a lot today, is one of our best-selling games now. Wingspan has surpassed it a little bit, but Scythe and all of its various accessories and expansions is still overall our best-selling game. And so I'm excited to chat about it with you today.
Awesome. Can you tell us a bit more about what is Scythe then?
Yeah. So Scythe is a collaboration between me and artist and world builder Jakub Rozalski. It is largely an engine building 4X game set in a fictional alternate universe version of Europe. It is an asymmetric game with a couple different asymmetric elements where each player is playing a different faction as they explore and conquer and build up their empire over the course of usually around 90 minutes, probably faster on the digital version. And along the way, players are building up structures and recruits. They're building up their team. They're recruiting more workers, and they're gathering resources, all of which are kept on the board, which I think that's a kind of a unique thing, not often seen in these games with maps, where the resources you have are actually kept on the board. So other players might try to compete over those resources and take them over if you're not controlling them. And yeah, so those are some of the core elements of the Scythe game. Oh, and there's also the player mat system, where you have a bunch of tokens that are on this player mat, and you are, as you upgrade and build mechs and build structures and recruit, you're pulling tokens off that mat and making your core actions more powerful than they were at the beginning of the game. So there's a strong sense of progression throughout the game as you get more and more powerful.
Awesome. So the game is really good. There is always a question with the creative process, like, designing a game like that requires a strong inspiration, I guess. Could you tell us a bit what, was your inspiration for Scythe?
Yeah, a lot of games, they start with a mechanism. A designer has a great idea for a mechanism or a great idea for a theme. Scythe started really with the art and on Jakub's side, the world building. So Jakub is an artist. We'll talk about him a little bit later, I think. But he had started to design and build this 1920 plus alternate universe. He had a few illustrations that were out there, and I happened to see a few of them posted on a website called Kotaku. And it immediately captured my imagination. I knew right away I wanted to design a game in that world. So I reached out to Jakub and asked if he would be interested in collaborating on a tabletop game project. And I was really excited that he accepted that collaboration. So that was the core inception of the idea of Scythe and how the game started. Yeah, at least.
Awesome. So the art was the core inspiration. I get it.
It was, yeah. There were also some other inspirations as well in terms of mechanical. So once I sat down and I tried to start designing this game, I had very recently played Terra Mystica and Kemet. And so those were 2 games that inspired the mechanisms of Scythe. Terra Mystica has a wonderful asymmetric side to it and a wonderful player mat system. It's kind of similar to Scythe, where you're pulling stuff off the player mat and putting it on the map. And Kemet is a wonderful game with a lot of head-to-head combat, where you don't really feel bad when you attack someone in combat, because that's the whole game. The game is built around that conflict and that combat. And if you do lose combat in Kemet, it's okay. You can easily get back into the game, which is the same idea that I tried to get into Scythe. And also Kemet has an easy way to jump across the board. So even though it's a big board, it's easy to jump across and get to your opponents. Scythe has the tunnels, and each faction often has a way to jump across the board to create connections between the players. If you want to go, you don't have to take all your time traveling across the board. You can just jump across there via a tunnel and start to interact with another opponent.
Cool, thanks. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jimmy.
So I guess we're here today partially to talk about the digital version, so I'm excited to hear about that. Let's start with the company, the Knights of Unity. Who and what is the Knights of Unity?
Sure. So the name says it all. We're the Knights of Unity. Basically, we're the company that works in Unity. Unity is a game engine that we are using professionally for creating games. We are making games since more than 5 years now, and we have completed over 85 projects at this point. The company is basically you could say an outsourcing company. So we are kind of like a supportive company for other companies out there. We are helping them make their games. We are making them games for others. And basically our core business is, let's say, around outsourcing. However, we are also making our own projects. Scythe is the best example of this. It had been one of the first projects that we have started internally. I think it was even the first game that we've made internally for our own, let's say, revenue and for our own portfolio of own products. And now we are expanding this portfolio. We have a couple of other games developed. However, today we are almost 100 people, so we have grown from 5 people in the beginning to 100 in 5 years. So it's quite a rapid growth, and so this is the Knights of Unity. Would you like to know anything else about us?
Yeah, I mean, it's neat to hear that how much you've grown. Same with Stonemaier Games. Scythe was the first game that was licensed to another company like yours. I was very flattered. I remember when you guys reached out to us and said that you were interested in it. And I'm curious, what made you originally be excited about Scythe? What made you want to spend all this time and effort and energy and resources into making Scythe a digital game?
Sure. So we always thought that Scythe is a magical game. It's kind of like it's a complex game that is light when you play it. I mean, we've been following Scythe for a long time, and when you had the Kickstarter, we immediately reached out to you that, guys, now after this success, you really need to make a digital version of the game. I remember that it took some time for us to finally arrive at a decision that we should do it. First, I think it took 6 months from the first email to another one after we finally decided to work together. Because you were not sure about it. It was quite a new, innovative idea to bring this game into the digital realm. But for us, it was kind of a must. As I often do this kind of a comparison, like when you have this force drawing you towards some goal and you have to do it, you just feel that you have to do it. It was kind of like that with Scythe. Like it was just the project that we had to pursue. Like we knew that we would do it well, and from the beginning it had a special place in our hearts, and it still does. It's still a very special project for our company. It has a special place in our ecosystem, and I'm really happy and lucky that it happened. As I used this word before as well, I'm gonna use it now. I call it serendipity in short. So that's my answer.
Well, I love it, and I know it took a while for me to come around to the idea of it, but it has really opened me up to other digital ports of our games, and you guys did such a wonderful job with the game that you really opened me up to those other games.
Thank you, sir.
And so, yeah. And so, Jack, I know Scythe started off just as an idea for a digital port, but it's grown a lot since then. So can you tell me about what platforms Scythe Digital is now available on?
Yeah, sure. Now we have Scythe on the 4 platforms. It's Windows, OS X, and 2 mobile platforms. We have Android on Google Play and iOS on Apple Store.
Awesome.
That's all.
And so, yeah, that's all. That's still a lot. I know that's a lot of development and software and programming.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. And
I
so
said
with all
this
that, what are,
fast, but it was a lot of work.
yeah, absolutely. And so what are the core features? Is there anything you want to highlight that you're really proud of that are some of the core features of those digital versions of Scythe?
Yeah, we have a few modes of the game, single player and multiplayer. And single player, you have hot seat with your friends with the computer, and you can play with AI. And on the multiplayer, you can play in 2 modes. One is play and go, and one is play and stay. You have tutorial, and great feature is crossplay, PC and mobile version. Yeah, I'll say that the main features. Yeah.
I can also add that one of the important features is the fact that the digital version of the game needs to have some kind of an onboarding part that allows the user to understand the complex rules of the game, which in the example of Scythe, there are quite a lot of rules, and not having access to rulebook, I mean, it would be even a deal breaker or game breaker if we were to ship a rulebook or add a PDF of I don't know how many pages long for players to read before they start playing. I mean, attention span narrows with players these days. I'm sure that we all can relate to that. And the fact that such a complex game needs to be fit into today's trends of instant action and just press start and play, it required us to design a full onboarding process for new players, which I think worked out quite well, because now, from what we've heard, that even players who never played the board game, they are able to actually learn how to play the game through the digital version, which is quite an interesting outcome of this sport. So yeah, I guess that this would be quite an interesting part of the project, where you have to squeeze all the rules into kind of an onboarding process, which is also interesting and efficiently teaches people how to actually play the game, so they are able to play PvP later on and multiplayer.
Yeah, the cross-play feature is very important in my opinion, because that ensures that you have as many players as possible when you come and play online. To reach critical mass, and so that whatever device you use or whatever device the other players use, you go there and you'll find people to play with, and that's really, really important.
Yeah, I agree.
I can say from the tabletop publishing perspective that I'm always looking. You mentioned the word onboarding, Peter. I love the idea of reaching people in different ways, because everyone wants to be onboarded into tabletop games in different ways. Some people really like sitting down with that rule book. Other people like watching a watch it play video or how to play video. But the digital game space is another wonderful way. I've learned so many games by playing the digital version of the game, and the game shows me through the tutorial or the onboarding process. So I love how it opens up the accessibility and the inclusivity of our community to bring more people into the gaming space.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And so part of that, yeah, go ahead.
Just want to extend on that it's not an obvious thing that you think of when you're thinking of porting a board game into tabletop. You aren't actually thinking of this as something that would benefit in return the board game players. That you would have kind of like a digital rule book that is fun to use. And
right.
I mean, we never looked at the digital version of the board game before from this perspective, and this is something that you kind of discover live. So that's quite interesting and always exciting.
Absolutely, yeah. And one of the things about that too, about reaching more people, and is offering the game on various platforms. And one of the exciting new announcements from you all is that there's a mobile version now available, right? Jack, do you want to speak about the mobile version a little bit?
Yeah, we had a release 1 month ago. 6th September. So now you can play Scythe not only in your house, but in train, in the car, but not while driving. And yeah, that's great. That's Jan said. Now we have more players in the same game. We have cross-player, so yeah.
I strongly encourage everyone listening to spread the word. There is the mobile version available of Scythe, such an amazing game on the mobile platform. I mean, you have to check it out. I believe that we did a great job with regards to user experience and porting such an awesome, vast experience into such a limited space, and I think it's still very much enjoyable and it transmits the same energy. If you don't mind, I wanted to ask you something else, because you said that Scythe started with art. Like you were inspired by the art of Jakub Różalski, who is one of the most famous Polish artists these days. Mainly thanks to Scythe, actually. So it was quite a symbiotic relationship you're having there. But Jakub is not only like. Can you since he's the Polish artist, it's quite interesting. Like the story behind how you guys met. Like you're not Polish. Like you don't have Polish roots. You're not related in any way. So could you please perhaps elaborate on your relationship, how it started, like how you met Jakub, or maybe you didn't, or how it all started?
Yeah, absolutely. And I should clarify that I am part Polish. I'm German, Polish, and Irish. So a little bit of Polish in there. But you're right. I've never met Jakub. I've never been to Poland. Jakub and I met after I emailed him based on that Kotaku article. And we have corresponded over the years, formed a great friendship and a great professional partnership over Scythe, all over email. We've never even had a face-to-face chat like this, but he and I think we're both emailers. We like to process our thoughts and put them into writing. And so we've formed this great relationship and friendship over email over the years. I do try to keep up with him in other ways because he is very famous now. So I follow him on Facebook, on Instagram. I get to watch his new little wild kittens roll around in the grass outside his mountain home. And it's fun to follow his life in that way. But yeah, I've really, really enjoyed seeing Jakub's creative process, how much time he spends on the art that he creates, and just being a part of that process, especially with Scythe. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess these days it's hard to have any other relationship than remote, but you guys you guys started it even before. So I had a pleasure to meet Jakub Różalski in person, like on one of the events here in Wrocław when he was a speaker. There was a very long line of people. Like even before we started making any progress with the game, I remember when we were starting the conversations about porting the game, Jakub had to see the demo, and it was one day before the presentation. I think we had a presentation Monday and we've met on Sunday. So I went especially there to meet him and to talk to him that, okay, hey, Jakub, it's me. I'm Piotr, and we're going to have a demo call tomorrow. And he's like, oh, that's you. Cool. So speak to you tomorrow. and thanks to this kind of, both meeting and the presentation of the demo, I think we managed to convince Jakub that we are able to provide the level of quality that he will be satisfied with, because as an artist, I do believe that he has high standards for any kind of port of his work, because it's kind of like it's almost as if he was putting his signature under this work. So I do believe that it had to be well evaluated by him as well. So yeah, can you tell us, like, since we're talking about Jakub, what attracted you in his art specifically? What do you like about it?
Well, I love the detail in his art. It has this kind of historical feel to it, where it feels like these could be real paintings of real things that happened, even though they're not. And I love that slight twist of instead of tanks in this world, we have mechs, and the way he paints them into the world really makes it seem like I'm looking at a history that could have been. And the mechs, they're in the paintings, they're often found in fields. They're not often fighting with each other. They're just there. They're part of the world. The people of the world don't seem bothered by them because they're so ordinary. And I love that sense of kind of everyday slice of life feeling that I get from his illustrations, especially with the mechs, but also with other elements of the art as well. Yeah.
Is that why you made a strategy game rather than an RPG or something else, or does anything else contribute to this decision?
Well, part of it is that I am much more of a tabletop strategy game player than an RPG player. I've only played a few RPGs. I'm definitely not an RPG designer. And so I even though I didn't have any game idea in place, Scythe didn't exist in any form until I discovered his art. But once I discovered that art and knew I wanted to make a game in that world, I sat down and I basically printed out all of the illustrations that he had already posted online, and I pasted them up on my wall. And that mural on my wall grew over the years. I have a photo of it somewhere. It's, my entire wall was covered with this art. And I would constantly look up at that art and try to figure out what mechanisms for the game fit that art. How can I capture the feeling that I get when I look at this art and this world into the game itself? Do
you think that Jakub is satisfied with this, with the outcome of the game? How do you think he feels about it? Have you discussed whether he's can you share his opinion or?
That's a good question. I think I don't know how often Jakub plays Scythe. I'm curious actually if he's played the digital version, and someday I should probably just try to play the digital version against Jakub. That would be fun to do. But I know he has played the game. I think he enjoys the game. He is, I think, much more focused on the story and the world, and that brought the various expansions. This expansion trilogy that we have of Invaders and the Wind Gambit and the Rise of Fenris. He was very much involved in that and telling us the story and how we could capture that story and the mechanisms of the game. But I think he is happy with how the game turned out. He loves the Scythe community. He chimes in the Scythe Facebook group all the time. And so I think he is really happy with how the game, the community, how the digital side all came together to form this much bigger world than he originally expected.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So thank you, Jamie. It's been very enlightening.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I love talking about Scythe. But I guess let's talk about the other really exciting thing which is Scythe Digital itself. And let's start with Asmodee Digital and Jan. Oh, actually, let's start with Peter. So we'll get both sides of this. How did Asmodee Digital get involved with this collaboration with the Knights of Unity?
Oh, yeah, actually, it could be a question to Jan, but I don't think he was on board at this time. Or maybe he was not.
For the technical part, just after.
Yeah. So I remember the time exactly because in the digital games world, it's so that some companies are producing games, some companies are publishing them, some companies are distributing them, and they are special experts in these areas. Since the beginning of working with Scythe, we wanted to put special care for the project to make sure that the quality is as good as possible. That's why the development took, I think, 1 year longer than anticipated, or even longer, because we wanted to put as much, let's say, focus on the quality as possible to make sure that the game actually reaches the highest standards. And with this regard, we thought that, okay, at some point we decided, I think after 1 year of development, we perhaps could benefit more from working and sharing the bigger cake, so to speak, with professional board games and digital board games publisher, rather than trying to do it alone and learning on our mistakes on such an amazing project. So we decided to reach out to the biggest company that was out there, which was Asmodee Digital, and still is. The digital board games don't have bigger publisher, as far as I'm concerned, at least. And and they said, sure, that's the kind of project that we'd like to have in portfolio. So it was quite a quick negotiation. They just wanted us to have to work with us, and so we are here now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I agree with Peter. I mean, at some point, as a studio, you realize that you need to talk to a publisher if you really want to reap all the benefits and of your efforts and your work and so on. And so that's why the Knights of Unity people understood that and came to us. and it was very logical because when you talk about board games, Asmodee is it's deep in our DNA in the physical part of the business. We are the first board game distributor and publisher in Europe and the number 3 in the US. But also on the digital space, we are really the first ones to do ports of board games to tablets, for example, or things like that. So it was a natural fit, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can also say that as a producer of board games or a studio that makes board games or digital games, I would say that this is kind of like you want to make sure that your focus is not distracted by activities that doesn't really that don't account to product quality. Like such a division exists because if you focus on production and production only and making the product as high quality as possible, then someone else can focus on making it as visible as possible, community management, etc. And I guess that it's a natural way of distributing strengths, so to speak, that one team focuses on quality and other team focuses on other parts of the business. So yeah, it's a decision that I believe most of studios these days are making. So it's nothing. It shouldn't be surprising, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important when you talk to a publisher like us that the fact that we speak the same language. We are board game fans, obviously. We understand, like Peter was saying, the value of quality and the value of the community, for example, these type of things. We have lots of values like that. So it would have been very different if Peter would have talked to a classic video game publisher, I believe. He got much more attention with us, I guess. So that's there are a lot of benefits of we're in the same business, we have the same players and so on. So it was a natural fit.
Well, I'm glad that fit worked out. Yeah, we've seen you've brought Scythe Digital to so many people as a result of that collaboration. And so Jan, I'm curious Scythe is a fairly top-ranked game, but there's so many other games out there. How do you decide which games to select to pursue a digital board game route?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. There are many people knocking to our doors nowadays. What we look at, of course, at the beginning is the market of the game itself. That is, if the board game is already successful, is there a community, an active community, that kind of things. What is the relationship with the game designer? What is the relationship with the publisher? And so on. You have all these, business and marketing parameters to look at very carefully, like things like the publishing contract with the game designer, all these things. But I would say that's the business part. And then you have all the technical part and the game design part, which are also very important because you can't port or you can't adapt all board games to the digital space. It's not possible. There are some games that you will never be able to adapt, how hard you try. So there is this other aspect about the game design, the technical constraints, and so on. So that's a whole area of technical issues and constraints to take into account. And so we have at Asmodee Digital, we have a really well-defined onboarding process when we evaluate a project. We have a roadmap with all these things that we need to check and verify. And so the due diligence is can be quite long sometimes. But we do that because what we want to be sure is that when we take the decision of funding a project or co-funding a project, that we have a reasonable reasons to believe that it's going to be a success. So all these things are part of our added value, I would say, to validate the project and decide to move forward.
Well, you mentioned a few of the constraints there, Jan, in general. I'm curious for Peter and Jack, if you want to chime in as well, too. What were some of the constraints when you looked at Scythe, the board game, a game with a 32-page rule book? It takes up, almost a meter of table space. Like, what are some of the constraints that you thought, how are we going to take this game and turn it into tabletop form?
Maybe I can talk a little bit in general about this, constraints, and then I let Peter and Jack take over for the parts that are really specific to Scythe.
That'd be great.
Even though I can comment on some of them as well. There are a lot of, like I said, there are lots of technical constraints. The most obvious one is the size of the screen. The real estate that you have on the screen is much smaller than what you have on the table, and it's even worse when you deal with a phone. That's probably the biggest constraint, okay? But it's not the only one. There are lots of other constraints, like, for example, if it's a game that is played in real time or a game with interruptions, it's going to be very difficult to adapt. Most of the time, what is possible only for games which are, what we call turn-based games, when there is one action at a time. Okay, so that's the thing we look at, and then there are other things like the degree of interaction you need to have between the players. For example, if it's a bluffing game or a game when you have to tell stories to the other players, that kind of things, that's going to be very hard. Obviously, especially if there is a voice part, and online not everybody speaks the same language. So it could be very difficult to adapt that and make the game impossible to adapt. So you have all these things to consider. So even though you have a game design that is already ready for you, you need to validate if it's possible to adapt it to the digital space or not. Peter, Jack?
Yeah, I can add in general. Digitalization have one big disadvantage, and the fact that is a board game, digitalization is a constraint in itself. Yeah, normally when you have a board game, you can play with your friends in your room, on the couch with snacks and so on, drinks. In digital game, you have no such of friends in real. Yeah, okay. You have chat in our game. You have Discord and so on, Skype, but not the same. Yeah. I don't know if you agree, Jan, with that.
I can extrapolate that a bit. So, in my view, it's like the also one of the challenges that actually was asked before, but the true, let's say, depth of the game lays within the atmosphere of this experience, and bringing over this experience from the real life into the digital realm is the challenge in itself. I guess that we are all facing the same challenge today in the era of remote life, where we are often forced to do online meetings rather than meet people real life, and I guess we are all still not there yet with technology, with the advancement of technology to mimic or to recreate the same feeling of presence with other people via any digital medium. So it is a different type of product, definitely, but it's for as a constraint, I would rather say a challenge to. Well, it will never be possible, or maybe someday will be, but today it's not possible with today's technology to port the atmosphere from playing on the tabletop with friends and snacks, as Jack said, to any type of digital device.
Yeah, I agree. It's I always say when you play a board game that there is what happens on the table and what happens above the table, between the players, and it's probably as much or even more important the interaction between the players is really what is the most enjoyable part in playing a board game. So when you do an adaptation of a physical board game into a digital version, then the challenge becomes how can you remain faithful to the game in terms of the gameplay, the rules, but also the ambience, the interaction between the players and so on. And how can you be as faithful as possible to reproduce this feeling, this experience, even though it's not going to, like Peter said, it's not going to be the same thing. But you need to find the key elements of the board games and of the interaction between the players if you want to do something that would work as a digital game. And that's really the biggest challenge. Because in terms of game design, it's very different from a video game. In terms of game design, you already have the design. So that's really the great thing. When you start a project like that, you have the game design, you have the illustrations, you have the rules, and the game is fun. So you already have that part already worked out. And the challenge becomes, and I'm sure Jake can elaborate on that, the challenge becomes, how do you move that into in the right manner to the digital space in such a small screen?
Yeah, that's right. And you have to prioritize what you want to show the player. Yeah, you have a small screen on the mobile, some bigger screen on the PC, but not so big on the table and the game in the real life. So you have to decide what you can show player on the first screen, what on second, third, and so on. One info is in the top, but the other player must click 1, 2, or even 3 times. Yeah, that was the challenge to make this puzzle with UI. Make this puzzle understandable for a player, yeah, for a player that not even play the board game.
Yeah, we mentioned earlier in this conversation, we mentioned the player mat. The treatment of the player mat in the digital version, I found it very interesting because it was more adapted to fit, the digital space and so on. Can you tell us more about that, Jake?
Yeah, the player mat is good for digital version because one thing is that you can, in most cases, you can do only one action per turn, yeah, top or bottom, and in the digital version we can highlight those parts. That player can do only these two things. Player see the other parts of the big mat and a lot of choices. But in this turn, we can highlight this small part and say on the screen to player, "Hey, look at this, and you can make this or this." This is a very, very helpful mechanic in digital version.
Yeah, the digital version has the plus that you can actually provide more information to the player. The machine can count for you the amount of resources you have, etc., and display it on the user interface.
Set up on the beginning.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, let's say, benefits of the digital version, but the main constraints, as Jack said, with this prioritization part, the fact that you have a constraint of a mobile device, let's say a mobile phone that has a 6-inch or 5-inch screen, and you have to fit there all the gameplay area as well as UI, as well as all the actions and the menus, etc. You can compare it to playing a board game through a wall with a small window in it or something like that, and you cannot really turn your head around. You just have this small window, and this is all you see. So you can imagine how difficult it would be. You need to reach through all the things and just present it in front of this window to see what's going on. So I would say that it's kind of the challenge of this proportions. Yeah. So design a board game on a tabletop, but you have to sit behind a wall with one brick out, and you have to play it. So, if you want to imagine how difficult it is from the UX perspective,
yeah, I can say I and team, the UX designer, learned a lot of about UX and UI from making Scythe.
Yeah, with regards to how complex games can be complex.
Yeah.
I mean, comparing to other mobile games, this is the top of the leagues when it comes to complexity with regards to information, UI, and overall complexity of the game. So this is why, well, it had been an amazing experience, and the fact that the guys managed to achieve a result that you can find on mobile is thanks to the fact that they know the game so well that because you need to know what information players needs to have and wants to have approachable and available at hand, and which can be hidden behind some one or two screens. I encourage everyone to check it out, and if you like it, give us 5 stars, please.
Well, one of the things that I love here about the digital version, and now that we're expanded to mobile too, is the back-end analytics. There's so much data that you have gathered and continue to gather from old players, from new experienced players, that we can learn information that we tried to gather during playtesting for the original prototype of Scythe, but that was, maybe 1,000 playtests. Now we have tens and thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of plays on the digital version, and we've taken some of that data and even there's a couple different combinations of player mats and factions that are just a little bit too overpowered and fast in the hands of a very experienced player. And one of them, really, some players had mentioned it to me a few times over the years, and I was like, I need data. I need some data to actually support if we're going to ban that combination. So I turned to you guys and I said, do you have any data suggesting that this is the case? And he came back to me and said, yeah, this player mat action combination. Yeah, we have the data. That was wonderful. Yeah. So what are some of those other?
That's something we found on some of our digital games that we did in the past. We have the game designers coming back to us, and we have the exact same discussion as you had. Like, we can because we have these zillions of online games going on and all the data attached to them.
Yeah. Playtesting is overall the area where digital will always be more efficient than physical. So you can always scale the playtests as much as you like and have hundreds of people play the game without the need of distributing physical games to them and recording it on video or something. Yeah, analytics is definitely the part where digital games are superior to board games, obviously. And you can derive a lot of interesting design information from that. Jamie, you wanted to ask a question?
Well, yeah, I as we're moving towards kind of the future of Scythe Digital, the future of digital games, and some of the assets, we've talked about constraints, some of the great things about them. One of my favorite things that I want to mention in terms of the future and one of the assets that digital games add is the music and the sound effects. We can't really get that on the tabletop, or you can. There are certain apps you can run to get that effect, but I love the music and the atmosphere. Peter, you mentioned atmosphere earlier, so I love the music, the sound effects, how that can immerse you in this world, even though it's on a small screen, like you mentioned. Do you remember that? Like those are some of the original conversations we had, I think, about the game. Like how can you capture the feel of these factions and music?
Yeah,
and I think you did a great job with that. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, we are very proud from this perspective. I mean, our musicians did a really, really good job, and I think you can even hear the music outside of the game. Am I right? Is it available somewhere as a separate soundtrack to listen to? So it's kind of like I mean, art is art. Either it's visual or it's you can see it or hear it, and it affects the senses. Yeah. So if you're sensitive enough, you can actually recreate the sensation of the visual with music. Yeah. So that's pretty much what we tried to achieve there, and I hope that the players agree that the music is wonderful in Scythe. That's true. We are proud of it particularly. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have board game players that play the board game with music from digital version.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So Jan, where do you?
Yeah, I'm sure of that. Yeah.
Jan, do you have any thoughts about the future of digital games, the future of Digital Scythe? Yeah.
Yes, this is fairly recent. The I would say the exponential growth of board games in the digital space, and I'm very happy about that because at the beginning when we started to do that, when the iPad came out or these moments, there were a lot of reluctance from the market, and especially from the physical market. I mean, the resellers and the players, they would tell us, well, if you come up with a digital version of the game, it's going to be a competition. It's going to compete against the physical version of the game because, the physical game is 40 euros or 50 euros or dollars, sorry. And the digital game is is much less than that. And in fact, it's completely not true. It's completely not the case. The digital people understood, and we have data to support that the release of the digital game actually helps the physical game, helps the physical market. And so you build a virtuous, a positive feedback loop, people, they're going to get to know the game from the digital version or from the physical version, it doesn't matter. But, you play the digital version because you have the physical version, and you play the physical version because you have the digital version, and so on. And ultimately, it's not about playing the board game, the physical board games or digital board games. It's just about playing the game and being, in this universe, in like what we were saying about the music and the arts and so on. I think what matters down the road is that the player remains in this universe, and that we actually build a community around this universe. And so after that, it doesn't matter. The media doesn't matter anymore. If you are with your friends in the evening, you're going to pull out the physical game, of course. But if you are alone in the train or alone in the evening in front of your PC in Steam, you're going to play the digital game, but you're still playing your favorite game. It's the same experience. It's a different experience around inside the same universe. It's
a different experience.
It's a different experience, but it's you are in the same community and so on. And players, they play both. They play both the physical and the digital games, and they're happy with that. So I think, and so the result of that is that we see many, many more people now knocking to our door and asking us to adapt their board game, their physical board game into the digital space, and people now have understood the channel, the retail channels, and they have understood that, and so they look forward to the digital space. And also we have new medias coming up, like digital actually electronic table that you would put on and play around. You have products like the Infinity gaming table, that kind of things. All kind of things that come around and it's going to be very very interesting. It's going to be very interesting. So it's going to grow even more.
Yeah, as Jan said, I agree that the games on digital and on board realms are not competing with each other, are rather symbiotic and are supportive to each other. It's almost as if you were saying that selling merchandise to a popular video or a movie is kind of like cannibalizing the same audience. I mean, this is complementary item rather than something that is in any way risk or contributing to some kind of competition. It's totally, I mean, we have never seen something like that. So that's kind of like one of these statements that you had to check, I guess, from the point of view of Asmodee Digital when they had doubts like that, or some people had doubts like that they needed a clash with reality, and reality just verified that it's totally not like that.
Yeah, and we are past that, and now everybody understood the interest of going through the digital space. But
it's always like that with a new thing. Yeah? When new thing comes, there is always doubt, and I think that the future is just more and more. I would say that the top 100 or 200 games are in a couple of years all are going to have their digital versions. In desktop and perhaps also mobile. So definitely bright future for for digital board games, in our opinions, I guess.
Yeah, the digital version and board game are symbiosis, but I think I would say it's extent. Yeah, when you have a board game, you have one experience, but on the digital version, you can touch the game from another side. When you have to play in the board game, you have to have a friends. You have to 2 hours, 1 hour, and so on. On the digital, the game is faster. Yeah, you can play even 2 or 3 games in 1 hour. So the experience is much different, but the game is the same.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. And another part, yeah.
You go ahead, Jack. No, go ahead.
And another part of the future and board games, I would say, is the new kind of digital games. That is board games made simple to the computer without the board game version, but looks like the board game, have the same mechanics, looks, and so on. This is two-way game. Yeah, we have another kind of digital games.
Yeah, that's true. It might be also something that we'll see in the future. Yeah, we also, I think, some time ago we talked about the transformation of games or porting digital games into tabletop games.
Yeah.
I want to use this occasion to make a small shout out to our friends who are now having a Kickstarter for their adaptation of a popular digital game called Frostpunk. So go check out the Frostpunk board game Kickstarter, back them up. And yeah, I think this is all from our side.
Yeah, well, I love hearing. It's been awesome to hear you guys talk about the digital space. I love what you've done with Scythe Digital and future digital board games in that space. And thank you also to everyone who tuned in today to listen to this stream. We really appreciate the audience who has joined us today to hear us talk about Scythe and Scythe Digital and the stories behind it. So thank you so much, and thank you to the Scythe fans in general, the wonderful Scythe community that has helped this game and this world blossom into what is more now than a tabletop game. It's a digital game. There's other offshoots of it as well that we'll see in the future, I think. And so, yeah, I just wanted to sign off here and give you all a chance to say what's the best place to find you and for fans to connect with you and your companies. Peter, sure. Why don't you start?
Yeah, why not? I mean, the Knights of Unity is reachable via most of the popular social channels. I would say Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are the top 3. Search us out there, reach us, and ask us about anything. If you feel like asking us about Scythe or anything related to the game, anything that we can share, we'll share. Anything that we can't share, we won't. But feel free to reach out. If you find any bugs or feel like anything should be optimized or done in a different way, we are always very welcome. You are always very welcome, and we are always open to such feedback. We never take critical feedback as something negative. Critical feedback is always the best because it contributes to optimizing the whole product and increasing the quality. So bring it in.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's where you find the Knights of Unity, Peter, Jack, and their wonderful team. If you want to connect with Stonemaier Games itself, the best place is to go to stonemeiergames.com, where you can find information about our games, digital versions of our board games, and other information about game design, Kickstarter, entrepreneurship, all those sorts of things. And Jan, what about Asmodee Digital?
Well, we're easy to find on the social media, Facebook and Twitter. These are the main venue, and our Steam community is very active. So, it's easy.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all, Peter, Jan, and Jack, for joining me today. And thank you again for everyone who listened to us. And we look forward to connecting with you in the future. Yeah.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.